Welcome to part 2 of the lecture on analyzing qualitative data. We have already covered the first two steps in such data analysis. First, getting to know your data very well by listening to and watching your recordings, transcribing and reading your notes and transcripts carefully. And second, organizing your data in such a way that you can access, sort, and code it easily. Spreadsheets are very useful for this purpose. So, what's the next step? Once your data is organized, or at least partially organized, you need to start looking for ideas and themes that emerge in what people say and write and how they do it. Let's note a few things that can help you look. First, note frequently repeated phrases or keywords. For example, if your data consists of interviews on translanguaging, do you hear participants referring to ethnicity, to work versus home environments? Do issues of affinity come up? These are the things you want to be noting and coding for. Stories are another important factor. We humans tell stories all the time. They emerge during interviews, but also during dinner conversations, in written journals, but also in tweets. Humans construct their reality through stories, and every story has an upshot of some sort. Observing and analyzing stories will allow you to see how your participants view and interpret their own lived worlds. And don't forget to note the unexpected. Never be discouraged that you didn't get the data you wanted to get or you thought you would get. Did you expect your participants to talk about feeling marginalized, but they talked about feeling accepted? Did you expect relative homogeneity in responses but got a wide array? Note all of this and return to it in your analysis. Most importantly, observe and take note of patterns from linguistic ones to interactional ones that will contribute to your analysis. As you look and register these patterns, words, behaviors, and stories, develop initial codes for them. What's a code, you might ask? Johnny Saldana, in his influential and comprehensive manual for qualitative data analysis, defines a code as a word or phrase that symbolically assigns a summative, salient, essence-capturing, or evocative attribute to a portion of data. This may sound a bit convoluted, so let's see some examples to unpack this term. Here is an excerpt from the data collected in a civics class. The names of the participants have been replaced with pseudonyms, and no status indication is provided in the transcript or in the analysis. Examine the data and try to see what you can determine about each of the four participants: Emma, Rafael, Sanravel, and Mercedes. As you read through the transcript, you will notice that Emma introduces the word cabinet and then asks the rest what the cabinet might be. She repeats the question twice, pausing for 3 seconds between the repetitions. That's quite a long pause. The researcher labeled this particular action concept illicit. We cannot hear and therefore cannot see on the transcript what Sanravel and Mercedes are saying in overlap. But judging by Emma's next turn, including the assessment "that's correct," we can surmise that they probably answered Emma's question. And Emma provides an elaborate definition of what a cabinet is. The researcher assigned this bit of talk the code concept definition. From the observed interactional behavior, you can probably surmise that Emma is the teacher and the rest of the participants are the students. It is the way she talks and the way the others talk that constructs their mutual roles in this environment. By observing multiple instances of concept elicits and concept definitions, the researcher may be able to determine how instruction in civics in this class is organized. As you code the data, observe the patterns in similarities of language and behaviors, in predictable or unpredictable differences, in the frequency of certain actions or wordings in particular contexts, in how particular events and actions are sequenced with respect to each other, or how they are made relevant to one another by the participants, even if subconsciously. Observe any causality or appearance of causality of one event or behavior by another. For example, in the data bit we looked at in the previous slide, the concept elicit seems to be triggered by the introduction of the topic of changes in the political cabinet. Before the topic is discussed, the teacher appears to want to ensure that the students know what the word cabinet means. Looking at the patterns of concept elicits in relation to the previous talk, we can determine how new vocabulary and content are introduced to the class. And looking at the pattern of concept elicits and concept definitions in relation to each other, we can determine what roles the teacher and the students play in co-constructing these ideas. Once you've made the first pass at coding your data, you will need to start grouping and analyzing these codes. In other words, you will need to move from individual discrete codes to larger analytical categories. This step is achieved by looking for groupings of codes that seem to go together because they share something. As you arrange codes by groups, you will be assigning them to particular categories. For example, if you've given the code of self-identification and the code of cultural traditions to particular bits of talk, you may find that they both occur when participants engage in talk about or construction of ethnic identities. At the same time, in talking about translanguaging, your interviewees may invoke their ability to speak two languages as an asset in employability or in communicating with customers. These two codes can be grouped under the category of economics and analyzed from the perspective of language as a commodity. Such analysis of coded data will help you identify the larger themes to focus on in your research and to discuss in your findings. It sounds at this point as you might be done. After all, you've coded your data and identified the major themes that emerge from it. But you're not done. As you engage with your data in the way just described, you may find out that your codes are not distinctive enough, or that some behaviors that you labeled in different ways are remarkably similar and need to be recategorized. Qualitative data analysis is reiterative. You may, and most likely will, give your data coding a second pass. So, in your first cycle of coding, you reflect deeply and assign the codes that you find the most appropriate at the beginning. You do this with a full understanding that these codes are neither final nor permanent. You will come back for the second cycle, in which you may expand some of the previous codes and collapse others and even identify new ones if necessary. Some researchers may even go through a third cycle, and if possible, it is never a bad idea to have a second set of eyes verifying and commenting on your coding. This is why research teams can be extremely helpful in working with qualitative data. And barring teamwork, data sessions where different researchers share their preliminary work and seek feedback from peers are always helpful. This has been a quick overview of the qualitative data analysis process. Let's quickly go over the steps again. We first familiarize ourselves with our data, which involves transcribing it. And as we transcribe it, we need to organize it so we can peruse and analyze it easily. During the first three steps of data analysis, we look for themes, ideas, or behaviors that draw our scholarly attention. We develop and assign codes to them and analyze patterns among them. Based on these patterns, we deduce the linguistic, interactional, and behavioral categories that we will examine in order to answer our research questions. To ensure the reliability of our analysis, we seek feedback on our processes and procedures, including our codes and categories. This feedback may come from our collaborators, our participants, our peers, and our mentors. This process is cyclical and reiterative, and we may need to go through the steps again to ensure the reliability of our work. And now you're ready to put these principles into practice. Happy coding!